Hello, I hope you're doing well. I decided to throw this in here this week just to take a look at. It's going to be stuff that's on next week's test at the end of next week. I thought I'd spread next week's work out a little bit. A lot of this is common sense. So this is about, yes, if you caught that little thing right there. Lots of flawed arguments going around these days about this virus. I hope you're staying safe. So this is basically about sustainability. What's that mean? Sustain, keep things going. Like what? Our planet, right? Our species, our all the other species that we depend on. Okay. So how can we do that? What kind of things can we do at home? Well, you know, if you don't need 4 paper towels to dry your hands, don't use 4 paper towels. In fact, use a towel would be even better. Simple stuff like that, right? You can watch this little quick video. I think that link will work if you want to, just a couple minutes. So here's a good graphic, and this is the problem, basically, is that there are competing kinds of things, right? Here they have 3 kinds of aspects of our existence. Environmental aspects, that's the one that science kind of is mostly involved in figuring out how things work. Then we have economic things, which can't be ignored. Then we have social kind of things, which can't be ignored, right? What kind of standard of living do we hope to have? What kind of standard of living is fair for everybody else? What kind of education do we need to acquire that standard of living, right? These up here are the kind of things that we can scientifically measure and come to some conclusions about, which are much less subjective than these. These 2 areas have a high degree of subjectivity, like how much profit do we need to make? Now, math tells you how much profit there is, so some of that's not subjective, but a lot of that is subjective, and that involves this word a lot: ethics. What do we think is fair in terms of trade, workers' rights, things like that? The whole point here is to keep our planet running and to be able to stay on it, so to speak. To sustain that, we have to consider all 3 of these aspects. So this little unit right here is basically about sustainability in terms of conserving things, especially things that might run out, right? And so we go back to now the idea that diversity is good. This kind of diversity we're talking about here, we'll get to the next slide, basically, but it talks basically about the diversity of different kinds of living things on Earth, right? And so we've seen from our evolution stuff that extinction is like what happens. More things have become extinct by far than things that haven't yet become extinct. But what is a problem here is the fact that it looks like, and officially we are, in the 6th period of great mass extinctions. So here is the kind of diversity we talked about a lot. In a population, in a same species group, how many different alleles are there? And we said, remember that the more the better, because it makes that population less likely to become extinct. Well, in this unit, in ecology, we're looking more at this kind of diversity. In our ecosystems, how many different kinds of species do you have? And the idea is, again, the more the better. This goes back to the food chain idea that it's like a big Jenga game. And if you start eliminating species, right, you don't know how many you might eliminate before it collapses. So then we have the simple idea that we don't touch on much, to be honest, that in our whole world, the fact that there are a diversity of ecosystems, we have deserts, we have tropical rainforests, we have this and that. That's also a good thing. In this case, this diversity is good. Good for what? Sustaining things, right? Keeping things the way they are, or hopefully even making them better. So here we have a couple examples that are scary, right? And these are kind of old statistics. It's gotten worse. 13% of known bird species threatened with extinction. Um, 200 different plant species have already become extinct since we've been keeping records. Another 730. 20% of known freshwater species of fish have become extinct or threatened, and those numbers are only bigger. Those are a little bit old statistics. So, um, the major threats to biodiversity that we're going to touch on here are habitat destruction, and overexploitation kind of goes hand in hand. We're exploiting, meaning using things too much. And part of the result of that is destroying habitats. Okay. So we have to a great degree, knocked down lots of forests on dry land. But I also just gave you an assignment about underwater. We're also doing some things that can cause these habitats to be destroyed, therefore putting species at risk for extinction, therefore playing with that food web Jenga game in a bad way. So here we have the idea that resources can be renewable or non-renewable. This is all in terms of time. If a resource can be replenished, like plants can regrow, after you use some plants, you can grow some more. It really makes a difference if you can grow them fast enough. And with plants, that's usually the case, so we call them a renewable resource. But things that are non-renewable, they might be formed still, but so slowly that if you use them way faster than they can reform, then we call them non-renewable, and we're mostly going to talk about energy, and we're mostly going to talk about fossil fuels, right? So here we have some different, other kinds of energy that we humans have figured out how to make happen: hydroelectric, wind, solar, using plant-based things to make like fuel for cars and things instead of fossil fuels. Those fossil fuels are again things like coal and oil, mostly coal and oil, right? All of these things have a downside, a cost to go along with their benefit. And one of the downsides is to have hydroelectric plants and big wind farms, and to grow these plants. That means you have to knock out some ecosystem that used to be there to build these things. And as far as economic cost goes, right now fossil fuels are still cheaper in most cases than any of these others. But the problem is that these fossil fuels will eventually run out because remember the carbon cycle? They form so slowly by that process called fossilization that we can't possibly have them form faster than we use them by burning fossil fuels. So they are therefore non-renewable, and whether it's 10 years from now, 10 million years from now, they will run out. Okay, so overexploitation again involves to a great degree human kind of things. In this case, we're talking about harvesting things, whether they're wild or not. We don't need that word really, at rates that exceed the ability for them to go. So, um, these non-renewable examples, there's a whole bunch of them. These kind of birds we overhunted became extinct. Uh, uh, Fish is especially in aquatic ecosystems, is a focus here because we are greatly catching fish faster than they can reproduce. And so we have all kinds of specific examples like the bluefin tuna. And then we have kinds of things that we don't hunt for food, but we either overhunt or we have taken away so much of their habitat that they're endangered. So again, we are weighing costs of benefits, and these are tough decisions. We have to take into account all different kinds of, again, aspects of economy and what's fair and what's ethical and what's scientifically, known. If we take away these, this might be the result. So this is an ongoing and always will be a big problem in our efforts to sustain our life. Okay, so a couple practice questions. If you want to try this is kind of interesting. You go on this website and you can calculate how much carbon it takes for you to live, your so-called carbon footprint, and you type in a bunch of your info about like different things about how many miles you drive each day, whatever, whatever. And if you want to do that, that's kind of interesting. Okay, couple of real quick practice questions. Which of the following is not an example of sustainable slash and burn technique to make land, block that out, to produce land for farming? That's not sustainable because you can only do that so much and then you don't have any more of that land. So, which of the following is an advantage of using cars that run on electricity instead of gasoline? Well, that's a difficult problem, right? Electric cars don't release pollutants into the environment. That's an advantage. However, to make that electricity, you have to burn something, usually like coal or gas, right? And so they still release those pollutants into the environment. So this is a tough one, but here's the basic idea of what would be correct in that kind of question. So the best reason for using wind, uh, it can make electricity less expensive, but there is a cost to that. Um, uh, uh, this is also a good reason. It conserves non-renewable fuels. They can have quite an environmental impact depending on where. Sometimes these big turbines that the wind blows, so they kill a lot of birds, for instance. A lot of birds fly into them. There's always a downside to these things. You can't put them at most locations. If it's not windy, they're no good. So we'll cross out those two. Um, it's right now the use of wind is not less expensive than coal and oil, so this would be your best choice in that one. So wants to build a new electric power plant to use water, hydroelectric, right? Which of the following should be studied? Well, I can argue that all of them are going to be studied, right? But to decide whether the company should build it or not in a conservation kind of way of looking at it, um, the price of the wires is something the company's certainly going to study, but not an ecological kind of thing. The contributions to support local sports teams, hopefully you can kick that one out. Um, so the efficiency of generators is something that certainly that company is concerned about. But as far as ecology goes, this is what you would want to study. That power system is going to warm waters in the river that it's using to cool things in their plant, and what's going to be the effect of that warmer water on fish species. I hope that was helpful.